Aloha. We must understand when we either study the message of the infinite way or talk about it or teach it or heal with it, that the infinite way is not so much a teaching as an experience. It is not so much adding or giving to the world another teaching or a new teaching as it is in giving to the world an experience. The infinite way actually is a God experience, an experience with God or experiencing the Christ. The books, the written message, the classes, the recordings, these are but instruments leading to the experience of the infinite way, the experience of God. The infinite way is not its writings. The infinite way is not its recordings. Or, let's put it the other way, the writings do not constitute the infinite way, nor do the recordings, nor the classes. The writings, recordings, classes are instruments leading us to the infinite way, and the infinite way itself is the God experience. Now, the nearest that I can explain that to you is in something that came to Don Blanding one day on the subject of the desert and water, in which it came clear to him that talking about water and thinking about water wasn't going to quench his thirst. That he would have to have the experience of water, not even seeing water or touching water, the experience of it, the drinking of it. Only in that would the thirst be quenched. Now, as many years back as I can remember, I knew that no matter what truth we know, it is not a healing agency. And no matter how much truth we know, it is not a healing agency. Almost from the beginning I realized that what we know of truth is merely a step leading to a certain state of consciousness. And that state of consciousness would be the healing agency. Now, it is true that where people do not know the letter of truth, the correct letter of truth, that it is very difficult for them to acquire the spirit or consciousness which leads to the actual God experience. And so, the reading of the correct letter of truth, the study of it, the hearing of it, all these are steps opening our consciousness to a final experience. And when the experience takes place, after that, the healing work, whether for oneself or others, is really incidental and very simple. It is essential that we understand the nature of God. And of course, you know the reason for that. Unless you know the nature of God, you have no way of knowing the nature of true prayer. And prayer is the avenue leading to God. It is through prayer that we make our contact with God. It is through prayer, communion, that we have the God experience. And so, if you pray and your prayers are not answered, be assured that James wisely said, it is because you pray amiss. And so if you have been praying, if you have been knowing the truth, and have not arrived at your demonstration, at the demonstration of harmony in your experience, you might just as well be honest with yourself and say, I have been praying amiss. I have not been praying correctly. I have not known how to pray. And if you make that admission, you will go the next step and say, that is because I do not know God. If I knew God, I would know prayer. Now, what is God? And if you take into your meditation that subject, what is God? Ultimately, you will be led to the secret of prayer. When you have achieved correct prayer or meditation or communion, you will then be led to God experience. And the experience of God will be a peace be still to any form of error that may ever touch you. As a matter of fact, continuing in the God experience will prevent about 90-odd% of the world's troubles from ever touching you. And the little that may touch you will be quickly resolved through God experience. As you know, meditation is one of the very important teachings in the message of the infinite way. And many people say, even after a year or 2 or 3 of reading and study, I still do not know how to meditate. And probably the reason is that it is so difficult in writing to encompass all of the steps in meditation. It seems so much simpler to voice it. And of course, in voicing it to you, we are fortunate in this age that we can voice it to the recorder, and so the recorder can carry out, the recordings can carry out to the world that which we can so poorly write. Meditation also has states and stages, just as prayer has, just as our healing consciousness has. And I would like to give you this morning an experience of a simple form of meditation which in and of itself will lead to a higher sense of prayer than you've known before. Now you will find that on different tapes and different recordings there are different illustrations of meditation. And that is because the one that I will give now will not be necessary a year from now. And probably one or another of those on another recording will be more suitable for then. And so on up to the highest form of meditation, in which no thought ever enters. To meditate, first of all, get comfortable physically. And in getting comfortable physically, be sure that you are sitting erect so that your spine is straight up and down. Don't have it curved or bent over or slumped. And that is not because there is any mystical or occult or mysterious or hidden reason. There's a very simple one, that when the body is in its most comfortable position, you can best keep it out of thought. You can be absent from the body and present with the Lord. And if your arm, for instance, is resting on a chair, that cannot be, because eventually the arm of the chair will stop the blood pressure and you'll become conscious of an arm. Or if the seat is pressing into your limb, underneath your limb there, eventually your foot will go to sleep, or leg will go to sleep, or you'll be conscious of your body. In the same way, if you are slumped over, you cannot breathe normally. And so it'll bring your body into your thought. And what we want to do is to be absent from the body and present with the Lord, present with the truth. So you get the most comfortable position you can, usually with your hands either in your lap, on your limb, and not clasped if possible, and the legs straight, the feet firmly on the floor, the spine as nearly erect as possible, and the head bent slightly forward. That you'll find is a normal sitting position which enables your body to be supported without any conscious effort on your part, and in a minute or two you'll even forget that you have a body. And that's being absent from the body. As you can see, it's really not being absent from the body, it's being absent from the sense of body, from the awareness of body. And so from there we go to our subject. What is God? Now, from your readings in truth literature, you have some concept of what God is. But that concept is perhaps Mrs. Eddy's concept, or Mrs. Fillmore's concept, or Joel's concept, or somebody else's concept that you've read about. And that is not what we're interested in. We are interested in this meditation in the question and answer, what is God? And we are seeking the answer from God. The kingdom of God is within you. So it isn't difficult to get an answer from within your own being. And of course, after you have asked the question, what is God, you automatically assume a listening attitude as if you're waiting for the answer. And while you're waiting for that answer, thoughts are bound to come, and you welcome them. thoughts that may be along this line. Not necessarily so, because it'll be individual with you, but it certainly will come very quickly to you that God is life, not merely because the metaphysical books say so, and not merely because the Bible says so, but because it is already clear even in your own mind that without life in the world, there'd be nothing. And so if God is manifest in any way at all, it must be as life. In the moment that that comes to your thought, just see what happens. You commence to think of the life of man, your life. If you're a parent, you're thinking of how that life became the life of your child. And right there you commence to see, why, wait a minute. I couldn't have given life to that child. I don't know how to impart life. Now, how did that life impart itself to that child? You commence to realize pretty quickly that it was an activity that was taking place within the mother, and yet for which the mother was but a vehicle. You may have, if you're a mother, you may have an hour of further thoughts along that line. Eventually you'll realize that why these trees out here are living, the flowers are living, the fish are living, the birds singing. All of these noises we're hearing, this is all life. Life? We just said that God is life. Yes. All of these things that we're hearing, you hear all those birds around? That's all God. We thought they were birds. That's all God. That's God expressing itself as what we call birds, trees, flowers, all these perfumes in the air. They're life. God is life. Well, that's the very God life coming to our nostrils in the form of odors, perfume. And so we'll spread and we'll see that a seed, until it's planted in the ground, can't sprout. It just remains a seed. Forever and forever and forever. It remains a seed. Until what? Until life begins to act upon it. The life that permeates the ground. There again you'll say, life? That's God. Yes. God permeating the earth, the elements of the earth. Acting upon the seed brings forth fruit after its kind. And oh, you'll go on and realize what's happening in the sky. Sun, moon, stars, planets, sunlight, sunshine, warmth of the sun, glow of the moon, brilliance of the stars, formation of clouds. And again you say, they're living, living, living. Yes, they're living. That's life again. And God is life. And therefore, there we have God again in the sky. The heavens show forth the glory of God. The firmament declareth his handiwork. Everything really is God revealing itself. God announcing itself. As you look around and realize the infinity of the forms of flowers, fruit, trees, foliage, the infinity of the fish out there in the sea, all of a sudden you commence to realize the nature of prayer and say, wait a minute. All these things exist without anyone asking God for them. All of these things exist without anyone praying for them. All of these things exist as the activity of God itself, without any human intervention, petition, even affirmation. Well. And I have been praying for some of those things, for meat and for fish, and for flowers and for homes. And here they are. They're God itself. They're not something separate and apart from God. They are life itself, and they're already here. It won't be long until you will grasp the point that this recognition that life already is, and that God is that life, regardless of the form in which it appears, and that it doesn't have to be prayed for in the old sense of either petition or the new sense of affirmation. Now you'll commence to see that prayer is this silent, meditating, pondering, recognizing the source of all that is to be God. The recognition of God as the source of all that is, that the recognition of God as the very life that we hear in that bird's throat. Recognizing God to be the tone of the voice in the song. Recognizing God to be the life of these flowers. We begin to understand omnipresence, and we begin to understand that prayer is a recognition of omnipresence, of the presence of God as every form, the presence of life as every form. Oh, you may, in this one meditation, think of nothing but God as life. But you'll find that in some future meditation, you will be struck by the fact that these birds are being fed, and the fish are being fed, and the flowers and the trees are being fed with rain and sunshine and minerals in the earth. And you'll commence to say, why, God is love. Not because John said it in Scripture. Now you will see. It'll be so self-evident that God isn't only the life of the trees, the flowers, the fruit, the fish, but God is love, because God is feeding these, sustaining these, maintaining, not only creating, but maintaining and sustaining, feeding, caring, protecting. And you'll have hours and hours and hours in which you will see the nature of God as love appearing manifest in this visible universe. Another day in your meditation, you realize that when you plant a coconut, you get a coconut tree. When you plant papaya, you get a papaya tree. When you plant pineapple, you get a pineapple tree. And then you'll begin to know that God is law. God is law. God is law. And there is no exception to God's law. No exception. White begets white, black begets black. Combination of white and black begets a combination of white and black. It's a law. And then you'll see that you don't have to protect anything or anybody. That the law of God is the protection unto its own creation. And you'll find it's a wonderful prayer. A wonderful prayer. The realization that God is the law. Just think, God is the maintainer. God is first the creator of all. And that makes all that is the very image and likeness of God. And then we find that since God is the life of all, and God life being eternal and immortal, all that is eternal and immortal. And then we find that God is love, maintaining and sustaining its own creation. And then we find that God is law. God is the very law of eternality and immortality. God is the very law of health and harmony and wholeness and holiness and perfection. You see, our meditation is really a prayer. And our prayer is a meditation. Well, we ponder this idea of God, and remember, I have only touched the surface as lightly as one grain of sand represents a beach. You can go on for a year, 2, 3 years, with the same question, what is God? And in every meditation get a different answer. And with every answer will come a new and higher concept of prayer. But one day, when you are meditating, pondering this idea of what is God, and realizing now the nature of prayer, this will happen to you. That you'll find all of a sudden that you just can't think any more about it. You've come to the end for today of what you can think about God or prayer. You just seem to come to a dead end, and no more thoughts about it will come. And then you'll sit there just at peace. No more thoughts, no more questions, no more answers, just peace. Thought will be quieted. Ears will still be open, the inner ear. And to you will probably come a long, deep breath, like a sigh of relief or a sense of release, something we're escaping from, a great release. It even feels sometimes like a burden dropping off the shoulders. Sometimes it's merely like a release of air from within the lungs. Sometimes it's a quick breath like that. Oh, many times it'll appear in many different ways, but those are some of the ways it'll appear. And when that release or that relief comes, you won't want to sit there any longer. You'll be so full of the Spirit that you'll want to get up and do something, and you'll find something to do. Some work you may have been neglecting, or some work that lies ahead of you for the day. But with that release will really come divine wisdom, divine guidance, divine strength. For this reason, that deep breath, that click or release, was a God experience. That was the actual presence or activity of God in your consciousness. It may have announced itself in no other way than the deep breath, or the sharp breath, or the click, or the release. But you will know by your reaction that you are tingling, that there's a life in you, that there's a an awareness in you that's more than your human selfhood. And you'll know that that's the presence and the activity of God in you, and you'll begin to understand Paul. I live, yet not I. Christ liveth in me. And you'll have that feeling right there. Why, this is the very Christ that I'm experiencing. This is the very presence of God, the Spirit of God. And through me, it does all things. It goes before me to make the crooked places straight. It goes before me to prepare a place for me. It is the cement in our human relationships, the love binding us together. It is the understanding that comes between me and all those whom I meet. It is the guidance and wisdom necessary for the next task that I have. Or it is the strength necessary. Or it is even the healing power necessary. Sometimes people who have studied truth believe that if they can just change a sick body into a well body, that's a spiritual demonstration. Or unemployment into employment, that's a spiritual demonstration. Or a bad person into a good person, that is a demonstration. Please believe me, these are not demonstrations. These are the effects of demonstration. The demonstration is that awareness of God's presence. It is that deep breath, that click, that release. That is the demonstration. When you achieve that, the health, the employment, the wealth, the home, the companionship, these automatically follow. These are the added things. That is why in the message of the Infinite Way you'll find that we cannot demonstrate person, place, thing, or condition. We can only demonstrate the presence of God. We can only demonstrate the activity of God in us. We can only demonstrate the realization of God. When we have achieved that demonstration, all these things are added unto us. If I were to believe that I have any way of demonstrating health for our patients or students, I can assure you I would mislead first myself and then them. I have no powers to demonstrate health or supply for anyone. But I can demonstrate the presence of God. I can get very still within myself and with patience come to a place of consciousness where I feel the very living presence of God, where I feel the activity of God in me, the stir of God in me, where I feel such a complete release from human fears about patients and students, that I know that God is on the field. And that's all that I can do. From there on, it is that presence of God that makes whatever adjustment is necessary in the mind, spirit, soul, or body of the patient or student and brings about their release from discord, inharmony, lack. Now, even our Master, Christ Jesus, said that he could not heal or feed. I can of my own self do nothing. It is the Father within me that doeth the works. And I say to you that I cannot go beyond the demonstration of Christ Jesus, and I am certain after these many, many years that you will not go beyond his demonstration. You will never be able to heal the multitudes or feed the multitudes. You will only be able to demonstrate the presence, power, and activity of God in your own consciousness, and then it, the Father within you, will multiply the loaves and fishes, will heal the multitudes, and will even raise the dead. It will do that. And so in your work for yourself, your spiritual work, your prayer, your communion, or what we call treatment, or in your work for your family or your patients or students, please remember this. Every time that you sit down to do any inner work of a spiritual nature, please remember what you're doing. You can't heal anyone, so please forget them. You can't feed anyone or employ anyone or enrich anyone. So the moment you sit down, turn away from the claim. The claim may be John Jones or Mary Smith. The claim may be cancer or consumption. The claim may be poverty, lack, limitation, unhappiness. But once you sit down to do your work, drop the claim and realize there's only one thing I can do, and that is gain the conscious awareness of the presence of God, and that's what I'm sitting down here for. How I achieve it? Oh, there are 100 ways, 1,000 ways. I can sit down as a beginner and just ponder this: what is God? What is prayer? And then be still and wait for that to come. Or I could sit down on another time and say, Father, I know that physical health is here today and gone tomorrow. A person may have a perfect heart today and die of heart disease next year. They have perfect lungs today and tuberculosis next year. So I know that just having a perfect heart or perfect lungs, that isn't health. Now, Father, what is really spiritual health? And since there's no way for you to even think about that, you very quickly settle down into this peaceful atmosphere of listening. And when your release comes, you will again have attained the consciousness of God's presence. Someone else may come and need help on employment. Well, you can't do any more about employment because you are not an employment agency, nor are you an employer. So there's nothing humanly, even mentally, that you can do about that problem. But you can sit down and say, well, Father, I of my own self can do nothing, but as I attain the conscious awareness of thy presence, harmony will be made evident. So you meditate. It doesn't make a difference whether you're meditating on what is God, what is prayer, what is employment, what is health. Just so long as you have something to meditate upon, some divine idea, until you come to the end of the subject, and then you'll find yourself at peace. You notice that I'm not telling you to stop thinking? Do you notice that I'm not telling you to still the human mind? And I'll tell you why. I know that you can't do it. Nobody has ever succeeded in stopping thought, in stopping the human mind. So I say, take a subject, meditate on it until you've exhausted it, and then you'll find that automatically, of its own accord, the human mind will be very still or very quiet. Even if there are some thoughts running around there, it has nothing to do with this. It won't interfere with God's activity. So don't be concerned. Don't try to stop thinking or to still the human mind, because should you ever succeed, you'd only bring about unconsciousness. No. Think on some spiritual idea. Think as long as thoughts will come to you about it, and then automatically you'll settle down into this peace. And pretty soon your answer will come. It may come in a Bible verse. It may come in a metaphysical statement. It may come in some inner assurance. And on the other hand, it may just come in this deep sense of peace, or the deep breath, the click, the sense of relief. But when it comes, you'll know it, and you won't want to sit any longer. You'll want to get up and be active, and you'll forget the problem, and you'll forget the solution, until all of a sudden someone will call you and say, I've got a wonderful job, or I'm feeling better, or I'm entirely healed, or I'm feeling worse, you better give me another treatment. That happens too. That the patient says, I don't feel any better, or I feel worse. Don't let that disturb you. It has nothing to do with you. You just go back and give another treatment. If your patient keeps calling for a year, you just keep going back, giving another treatment. There are reasons why everybody doesn't respond to the first treatment. There are reasons why everyone doesn't respond to an instantaneous healing, and good reasons. Not only good for the practitioner, but very good for the patient. It is like the Hebrews whom Jesus fed. He multiplied loaves and fishes for them. And then he went across the sea, and lo and behold, the next day they followed him. What do you want? Well, I want to be fed. But I fed you yesterday. I showed you the loaves and fishes yesterday. Well, today's another day. You see, the Master didn't mean really to feed them, just to keep giving them loaves and fishes. He meant to show them the principle of supply. But they didn't see that, and so he said, oh, all you saw was the loaves and fishes. He wanted them to see the principle. And so you may have a patient or a member of your family or a student who at the moment is only interested in the healing and the loaves and fishes. They may get it. They may even get a second healing or a ninth healing or a 10th, but sooner or later they'll find it won't work. And then they'll say, oh, Christian Science doesn't work anymore, or Infinite Way doesn't work, or Unity doesn't work. No. They'll work all right. But you just can't keep on demonstrating loaves and fishes. The day must come when you learn to demonstrate the presence and power of God in your consciousness. And so sometimes it's very good if your patient doesn't get healed too quickly, if what's in their mind is just the demonstration of loaves and fishes. Because just a little delay, and sometimes a long delay, is necessary to reveal to them that we don't come to God for loaves and fishes. We come to God for God. And then when we have God, all these loaves and fishes are added unto us. And it's just that way. I don't have to remind you of what you would think of a so-called friend who was only a friend because of what they could get from you. pretty soon you'd lose interest in them and their friendship. But on the other hand, what a joyous thing it is to give to a friend, as long as the friend isn't looking for you to give. Isn't that true? So it is with God. You'd be surprised how bountiful a father and mother God is. You'd be surprised how bountiful and wonderful God is when we love God for God, when we seek God for God, when all that we want in life is the attainment of a God experience. The psalmist says, "My soul panteth, thirsteth after God, as the hart that seeks the waterfall." And so, whether you are sitting down to meditate or pray or treat, for yourself or for another, please remember this. You can only have one goal if you wish to be successful. Your goal must be, at each sitting, to have a God experience. That is, an awareness, a feel of the presence of God. Never sit down to meditate, pray, or treat, to heal somebody's ills, to enrich somebody's lacks. Never do that. Sit down only for one purpose. I and my Father are one. Please let me have the realization of that oneness. And then you'll find that when you've gained that, your patient, if they're at all receptive and responsive, your patient is healed. At this point, a question comes into your thought. Why isn't everybody healed? And why aren't they healed more quickly as a rule? And I give you the master's answer. There are 3 states of consciousness. There is the barren soil. And there just seems to be no use of planting spiritual seeds in that soil because it won't take root. You can't get any fruitage from it. And there is shallow soil. You'll work with these people and they seem to catch it. They even have some demonstrations. But then some little severe trial comes, a hot wind or a cold wind or a strong wind or an iceberg, and it's all rooted up. And you say, why, there was no depth there. There was no depth. They weren't seeking God. There was no love of God there. Well, of course, those people, if they keep coming back, eventually will develop a greater depth of fertility. And then, of course, there is the fertile soil. And anything, any spiritual seed you drop into it will bring forth great fruitage. Now, that doesn't mean that we should sit in judgment or condemnation on anyone, nor does it mean that we should refuse help to anyone. But it is an explanation of why you may work longer with some people than with others. Because even barren soil eventually takes on some fertility if you'll just work with it patiently. But do not indulge self-criticism or judgment if your particular relative or friend or patient or student doesn't respond quickly, because it isn't your fault, it isn't God's fault, it isn't the infinite way's fault. Very often it isn't Christian Science's fault or Unity's fault. When a person follows a spiritual teaching with sincerity, with real integrity, with the love of God, I say to you honestly that whether they're following it through Christian Science or Unity or the infinite way, they will arrive at their goal. There's enough truth in any teaching, in any of these spiritual teachings, to enable a student to reach the final goal in proportion to their own integrity, loyalty, fidelity to God, not to man, not to woman, not to organization, to God. If we climb through Christian Science or unity or the infinite way, not to make a God of these three, but to use these as an avenue to the realization of God, you'll find them all good. It's the wrong use of them, the abuse of them. It is the misapplication of the term loyalty and fidelity that sometimes leads people astray in them. Now actually, anyone should reach in this present life a very high degree of happiness, wholeness, perfection, and if their inner nature is capable of it, they can attain the full degree of mystic, of Christhood, of divine sonship, spiritual sonship. But anyone at all may attain some measure of that, and a very good and harmonious measure. But let me assure you that it will be only in proportion as you understand that the object of prayer or meditation or communion is God experience, not healing a sick person or enriching them. Those things are the added things. And so whenever you sit down to give help to a person, to a cat, to a dog, to a bird, a plant, just forget them and say, now, Father, all I seek is the realization of thy presence. And then meditate in any of the ways, or treat in any of the ways that are shown forth in the Infinite Way writing. Because each of those will lead you to that final step where you don't treat at all, or pray where you just sit. A sense of peace enfolds you, and then it culminates in that release. And you'll find that as that release comes, that is itself the presence that goes out and makes the crooked place a straight. Thank you.